All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Wow, what a hot day it was yesterday. Man, anybody get outside yesterday and get some vitamin D? Yeah, I did. I got some vitamin D. By the way, so thank you all for being here today. Really appreciate it. We have a really distinguished speaker here today with a really great organization, S.T.E.P, support the Enlisted project. Thank you, Linda, for bringing Tony here to speak with us. Tony Teravainen. Yeah, he's the CEO and co-founder of the S.T.E.P program. He assumed his position as president and CEO in February of 2014 after serving as board chairman, director, and volunteer since 2009. Being the son of a career Air Force father, Tony knows firsthand the hardships young military families endure. Additionally, a medical condition abruptly ended his career as a U.S. Navy submariner. And then he went on to a professional career, and he spent eight years in operations, repair, and project management areas of the U.S. Navy's submarine nuclear power program. He serves on the San Diego North Business Chamber Economic Development and Advocacy Advisory Council and the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce, Defense, and Veteran and Military Committee. He holds an undergraduate degree in business management and nuclear engineering and a master's degree in executive leadership from the University of San Diego, and is currently pursuing his PhD at Liberty University. Married with two daughters and a son, Tony resides in Highland Valley area of San Diego County, where he enjoys ranching his livestock and tending to his orchards. Tony, welcome. Come on up.
That was a fantastic introduction. Okay. Can you hear me? Oh my God, on?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that kind of blew my whole startup. I was gonna try to tie myself to this community. It's interesting. The hand of fate's in a lot of things. And I was a young submariner on a submarine out of Norfolk, and I did a great job. And the CEO told me anything I want to do, he would help me do. So I wanted to get into the nuclear planning area, out of operations into repair and planning. So I got nuclear planner school, which was 16 weeks down in Charleston, which is always fun for a young single sailor. And then I said I wanted to come up here to TRF to go to the Trident refit facility. He's like, well, you're not that good. So I said, well, how about San Diego? At least get me across the country. So I made it to San Diego. And yeah, like we said, after about 8.5 years in the Navy, medically, I wasn't allowed to return back to submarines or work with nuclear power anymore. So they retired me. And from that point, spent about 18 years doing nothing with the military. I convinced somebody to give me a job as a maintenance worker. And I started going to school. I started my own businesses. I continued to progress, and I eventually found myself at Booz Allen Hamilton doing strategy, consulting work, process improvement, change management for the government. And at that point, I had turned to thinking much broader. I had become somewhat of a community understander, but not really getting deeply involved with the community, kind of grown up in a lot of ways. And there was a pro bono strategy planning opportunity that was presented to me at Booz Allen. And they said, hey, we need somebody to go work with us with a nonprofit that works with military families and help them develop their long-term strategy. I grew up in a military family. I was a military person, so I really understood what was going on, but I didn't understand this nonprofit side as much. So I actually had to hit the books again and figure out how nonprofit strategies are different from commercial strategies or government strategy, and took the time to do that. And I worked hard with that board of directors, and we came up with a pretty good strategy to move forward. And they asked me to stay on, and then they asked me to join their board. And I did all those things because I thought it was interesting and I thought it was powerful. As a young board member, I didn't know what to do. I didn't really understand. I knew what it was like, what I was hearing in these board meetings, but I didn't understand the tactical side of it. As an entrepreneur myself, I wanted to learn more about what was really happening on the business side. So I would spend more time in the office. I would spend more time going to the events. I would go try to meet the clients and the people that needed this help and try to really understand and wrap my head around what it's like to need this service, to deliver this service, and how it really operates. From there, they continued to advance my leadership on the board. I was the youngest person too, so I think they were taking advantage of me. But it was an enjoyable time, and that probably lasted about 3 years. And then that nonprofit we were working with, they changed their mission and they wanted to get closer to wounded warrior care and transitional housing and move away from military families. That was the thing. A lot of agencies were realigning their missions and visions in 2012. And that happened with us. And, you know, as a board of directors, that was very tied to putting in a lot of effort to work with these military families and try to work this new strategy out and try to do things that were highly impactful in the environment we were operating in. It didn't seem like leaving the keys and passwords on the table and closing our business and walking away was the right thing to do. It really didn't feel like that. So we said, is there any other options? He said no, and in good faith, we tried to really come up with some kind of solutions. And at the end of the day, the answer was no. So we made the decision to resign our charter, change our name to S.T.E.P, and take it out on our own. And this was really our first big step in saying, we want to do this ourselves. And we also want to, now we have the freedom to try to focus on what we thought was more important. We were able to do that. So as the strategy guy, as the entrepreneur of the group, they made me chairman of the board. And I was thrust into that leadership position as we were creating S.T.E.P. And really the question came, what do we want to do? And what's the most important thing we can do? We all understood the plight of the military families. We understood what it was like to be in the military. We also knew there's a lot of people out there just doing stuff. And doing stuff really didn't seem like the most comprehensive and the most valuable thing we could offer. Handing out Easter baskets, helping people pay a car bill here or there, giving out crayons, giving people tickets to the baseball game or to SeaWorld or all these other things. It just didn't seem like there was a long-range plan associated with that. And that's what really I'd spent a good part of my life on. So what was the end game, right? What were we trying to really achieve? And what I wanted to do was take that to the next level. I'd seen a lot of families standing in line. I'd seen a lot of kids, seen a lot of worried faces, and all we were doing is handing them food and diapers for a week. How do I take this interaction with that family and make it more impactful? And then how do you quantify more? And then what is impactful? And really started going down this path of help them do better financially. Well, what does that look like? How do we measure that? And eventually we came up on this term self-sufficiency. How do we help them become more financially self-sufficient? Maybe so they don't need people like us. Maybe they can choose to use people like us and engage with the community to help these things, but they don't have to. And then it really came down to, what if we make this financial crisis their last financial crisis? And that ultimately became our goal. How do we help a family that's in a financial crisis, facing imminent loss of a basic necessity? They got a disconnection, a repossession, an eviction notice. In their moment of crisis, can we build a program where they can turn to us and we can help them through that crisis and then make it their last one? From that point on, that they're able to manage their finances in a way that suits them and their family, and they can achieve that full potential. That ultimately became our goal of what we wanted to do. I'd done a lot of change management work with the government, helping organizations think it's a good idea to move from offices to cubicles through all these different processes. So I understood a lot about changing behaviors, changing the way people think about what's going on around them. I knew I was no expert in it. And what I did from there was connect with a social worker who'd spent at that point about 35 years helping people change behaviors. She'd worked in homelessness, she'd worked in obesity, she'd worked in child abuse, she'd worked in elder abuse, she'd worked in all these other areas what I would consider where us humans can very easily start exhibiting chronic self-destructive behaviors. We all know the right thing to do in a lot of areas. It's not always the best thing for us to do. And it's very hard for us to change those habits. And if it was possible for somebody to sit across the table from another person and then give them a blank Excel spreadsheet and say, spend your money this way and you're going to be fine. And if the light bulb went off in their head and they could change the way they spent their money, the way they understood their money, the way they used their money as a tool, then we wouldn't need STEP, because people could just change behaviors. You also wouldn't need Nicorette or AA or any of these other areas that are out there in the community that help people change their behaviors for the better. So together, her and I created a behavioral intervention around finances. She brought in these 5 social work modalities. She brought in her experience of helping people move through change. She brought her experience of building programs and building metric systems in that space. And I brought my experience from strategy, change management, and Booz Allen. And together we created this program. It is 90% effective at changing the financial behaviors of folks that go through the program when measured a year after they graduate the program. 9 out of 10 of the families that go through the program a year after have continued to improve their financial wellness score, continue to work towards their goals. And this is over about 8,000 families at this point over the past decade. And of those 8,000, only at this point, 3% of them have ever come back needing more money. We're going to take them through a counseling program. We're going to write a check if we have to restore, retain their basic necessities. We're going to get them to a point where they have a plan. They're fully empowered. They're educated. They have all the tools and resources to succeed. We're going to throw them out in the world. And then we're going to call them back in 30 days and wait for it, because they're going to say, you wouldn't believe what happened. We know what happened. Life happened. It's not the challenge that came to them next. It's how they handled that challenge. And their financial coach, their social worker, their financial counselor is going to talk to them about how they handled that problem, how they got back on the horse, how they adapted their world, how they reacted to it, and help them understand that again, what they need to do, help them realize what they need to do. We're going to come back at 2 months, at 3 months, at 6 months, and 12 months. We're going to follow them for that year while they're achieving those long-term gains that are very important for institutionalizing, this change. And then the last step of change management, institutionalizing those behaviors. And that's what we want to help them all the way through. So it took, we've been doing this for 10 years. We're in our 11th year. And it took us a couple of years to really get this understood. And the first couple of years were, are we wasting our time? Are the military families going to come to us? And the other piece we had to answer would the military leadership support us? There's a lot of people out there trying to help the military. I don't need to unnecessarily compete. I have a day job. I have kids. I have a family. I have a ranch. I've got lots of good stuff to do. Do we need to spend our time doing this? And then the last piece was really, would the community support it? The last thing we wanted to do is become another extension of the government. We also didn't want to be beholden to our funders in a way that didn't work for us. When we created STEP, we created our mission to help young military families, transitioning veteran families who are in a financial crisis move to financial self-sufficiency. That's our mission. Our vision is to be responsive. Oh my gosh. Responsive, reliable, and respected. That's another R. That's pretty embarrassing. Relevant, reliable, and responsive. In order to do that, we have to work with each client. Each client that comes to us gets their own social worker. They get their own 20 to 30 hours of counseling time, whatever their situation needs. They get the financial support they need. They get the aftercare that they need. While they're with us, we have a warehouse full of donated goods that great community members have donated to us. And we can help them get the baby clothes, the diapers, the food, mattresses, cars, bikes, toys, books, bottles, whatever they need, people have given us, and we can help them have that. Many times what was found was federal and state funding doesn't allow us to do the program that we want to do it. And we made our core value number one to do the right thing. And that's by each of the families. And that's by the communities we live in. And often those types of funding models will handcuff us. So we said, let's just be community funded. Let's just be an extension of the community. We know the community wants to support our military. We know the military needs the support. Let us be the conduit between those two organizations and let us pass through and help make that connection. And that's what we've been able to create at S.T.E.P. In those first 3 years, it was demonstrated clearly that our services were desired. The military families came to us, the military leadership wanted to see more of us, and the communities wanted to support us. So then our next 3 years were, all right, well, if we're going to do this, then let's do it right. Let's find a way to get our financial house in order. Let's start to formalize these process procedures. Let's double check these metrics. Let's do all the things that a solid business should do. And then after the 6-year point, we were really solid on what we were doing. We were looking at this 90% success rate. We were extremely confident that it was accurate. We had won tons of awards. We'd won tons of recognition. And at the same time, every week, we were getting calls from outside Southern California for people. We good? You sure? Okay. Can you all hear me? Do I need to talk louder? Okay. So at the same time, so at that point, we'd created Support the Enlisted project, and our domain name was stepsocal.org. As the previous agency, we had served a greater portion of Southern California, and we thought once we grow up, if we can fully serve that area, that would be the greatest thing ever. So San Diego houses about 10% of the military. So of the military, all the service members in the military, the 101.2 million of them, about 10% live in San Diego County. About 13% live in the southern 8 counties of Southern California. And that was our area, and that's what we were taking care of. Marketing, branding was always a challenge because anybody new that came to Southern California had no reason to expect there'd be something like a S.T.E.P there. So we had tons of outreach. We had tons of interface with the military families. We had tons of time out on the street, trying to meet those folks. And in doing that, people saw that we cared. People saw that we didn't want to just hang our shingle out and say we had the greatest program in the world, but they saw that our mission was to put that program into action and put it into the hands and get those incomes or outcomes into the hands of the military families. When people left San Diego or Southern California and went to another duty station, they would tell their friends about us. And we would get phone calls like, hey, when I was in San Diego, I used your service and y'all saved my marriage. And now my neighbor needs you, but we can't find your office. I said, where are you at? She said, Pensacola. It's like, do I really have to tell this person no every week? Every time somebody like this calls me from across the country, how is this doing the right thing? How is this living by my own core values? I got that phone call. My business card has always had my personal cell phone number on it. And I got that phone call on my cell phone. And a week later, I got a call from a transitioning veteran. And he was in Michigan. And I could hear his F-250 idling. And he was talking to me in a way where I knew this wasn't the first time he said this. He was talking to me in a way that I knew he had more people on his list to call. And he was very matter of fact. He had zero emotion in his voice. And he said, hey, you help veterans? And I said, yes. And he said, we just moved out of our house. We lost it. Everything we own's in the truck. I just put the rest of my money in the fuel tank. Can you help me? I could hear his wife yelling at the kids. I could hear the dog barking, hear the truck idling. I could hear the truck stop he's at. And I said, where are you? He said, the UP. I'm like, Michigan? He said, yeah. And I knew at that moment, I'm going to say one more word to this guy. And he's going to say thank you and hang up. And I will never, ever have an opportunity to touch this man again. I said, I'm sorry, man. I just can't help you there. And he said, thanks, bye. And I'm sure he called the next number on the list. Him and his wife probably sat there in that hotel room or wherever they're at last night and went through the internet looking for people that say they help veterans. We've met a lot of agencies in our partnerships that say they help veterans, say they help military families, and they don't do it in a way that we think is the best way to do it. So really from that point moving forward, so if this program is truly 90% effective at permanently changing the behaviors of our military families, why am I only offering it to 13% of the military? Is that the right thing to do? And the answer came back is no, it's not the right thing to do. I worked with my board and I got permission to explore looking at serving people in other areas. So from that nugget, I went through a list of all the areas I thought would be the first best place to attempt an expansion. Y'all won, the state of Washington won, so congratulations, you're winners today. Y'all have the similar cost of living issues that we have in Southern California. Y'all house about 7% of our military in this state. Most of that military is surrounded around the Sound. You know, you got one base up in Spokane, and some Coast Guard out on the coast, but most of it's right around here. A lot of Navy relationships, right? In Southern California, we work a lot with the Navy and Marine Corps. We had a lot of Navy relationships at Navy Region Northwest, at Whidbey Island, at Everett. And we knew we could leverage those relationships. You also have a very large Army presence, and you have some Air Force presence. About 2% of the families we served in Southern California, of all the families we served in Southern California, only about 2% were Army. The Army makes up almost half the military. We knew if we wanted to make a go at this, we need to understand how to take care of our Army clients better, right? Learn to speak Army, eat crayons the way they eat crayons, however they do it. We need to become, you know, more familiar with that environment. And Joint Base Lewis McChord really offered a lot of that. We had a lot of volunteers on the ground here that already had called us up and said, if you ever want to start an office in San Diego or in Washington, you call me. But we had people like that in about 9 or 10 other states as well. When I threw in the fact that y'all are in the same time zone as Southern California and a direct flight, you really became the first best choice for us to see if we could do this. At the same time, I created processes because I had to go back in and change my bylaws and change the structure of the organization. I changed my bylaws to take out all location. And I built in a process to be able to handle those spouses from Pensacola or this veteran in Michigan that needs that service. We started all this about 3 years ago. My first flight up here to meet with all the military leadership to say, this is what I've been doing in Southern California. Are you interested in supporting me doing it here? This is where I started to meet the volunteers up here. I went around to some local businesses. I went around to local nonprofits and I said, this is what we've been doing. Would you be interested in supporting us here? I had tremendous feedback from the community here and from the military leadership, and they all said yes. And one of the questions I asked was, I was at a bank. And I said, so you're so excited about us coming up here. If everybody's so excited like you are, why is nobody else really working with these military families consistently at this in the trench level? A lot of what we see, a lot of the area, the focus is like homelessness and food insecurity and things like that. Is a lot of the agencies that are supported heavily. And one of the answers I got back was, there's nobody like you up here that wants to set up shop, go down on the base, run around the bases, hire a person just to go find clients to serve and to build those relationships and to make it work. I said, well, that's what's made it work in Southern California. Building relationships, being trusted, having great referral partners in the community, having supporting agencies that we can partner with, having a supportive military, having, 65% of the referrals that we get, most everybody comes to S.T.E.P on a personal referral from somebody or another agency. 65% of those referrals come from on base. Friends, coworkers, military supervisors are almost half of all our referrals. And then the two agencies they go to on base, the relief societies and the community services. So Marine Corps Community Services, Army Community Services, Navy's Fleet and Family, those types of agencies. They'll go there when they get into financial trouble. And that makes up 65% of our referrals. You know, 35% in San Diego specifically is about 150 agencies that will have somebody that trusts them come to them and say, I have this problem. And that agency has to say I wish I could help you, but the best place for you is to go to S.T.E.P because they have what you need. They have what's going to help get you through this problem. And that's the relationship we built with our community. And the folks that we talked to up here said, yes, we want something like that. We want somebody that's going to be permanent, lasting, and can be 100% trusted. Those 8,000 families that came to us and went through our emergency financial assistance program, we've been able to help 100% of them. Of the qualified families that came through, we were able to restore or retain the loss of their basic necessity. And we're able to get them a plan to move forward. Only 9 out of 10 of them succeed at the 1-year mark. But I know we made a positive impression on 100%, and we made sure all of them had the dignity of their basic needs surrounding them as we work with them. And that's really a fantastic accomplishment for us. And that's why we wanted to share it. We don't want this, I guess I don't want this to be about us. It's kind of the opposite point I'm trying to make, so I just said. But we don't want this to be about us. We want it to be about taking care of the community and the family. You know, you talked about me pursuing a PhD, and that was something that came up about 5 years ago. I've been the CEO for 10 years now at S.T.E.P. And about 5 years ago, I got to the point where all my partners that were working with foster youth, that were working with sick kids, that were working with immigrant situations, environmental, homelessness, all these other areas, I kind of thought through all that, and it's like we all have a common set of problems, and it comes down to policy. A lot of times the policies don't do what we think they're going to do on the surface. So that was the driver for my pursuits into a public policy PhD. How did we get here? And then once I get that knowledge and finish that program, I'll be able to continue to move forward in really this idea of communities helping their communities, right? And understanding how we got here so I can help change that direction. And a lot of that was born from S.T.E.P. There was no reason that S.T.E.P should have been successful. I became the CEO because I couldn't hire another CEO. I was the chairman of the board. Nobody would take the job. I tried at 2 separate points to hire somebody. And I finally turned to my wife and I said, if this is going to work, I'm going to have to do it. And that meant me leaving my job at Booz Allen. In all fairness, I took a year unpaid leave of absence, just in case I wasn't successful. But it's been great. I figured it would take me 6 months to turn this place around. Like I said, it's been 10 years. And one of the things I said when I started, I said, I'll give it 6 months or until it doesn't need me anymore. And that really became the asterisk in all this, because after the first 3 years, great, I proved concept, right? It works. We're helping families. Everybody wants the program, but it wasn't ready to run on its own. The next 3 years, we get it running on its own. And now is it time to walk away, or is this sustainable, or really where we want to keep it? Excuse me. So here we are on this expansion. Now, the successes that we've had in Washington State and across the country gave the board the successes that y'all helped facilitate, gave the board the confidence that there is demand outside of Southern California for this program. We can help families in Washington State, in Michigan, in Florida. And last year, when I asked them the question about what our next 10 years looks like, their 10-year vision came back that we should be available to all of our junior military and transitioning military families across America. So y'all helped me demonstrate that, and y'all helped prove it. And we're very thankful for that. I do not have a slide deck to go over kind of the what S.T.E.P is part. This was more conceptually from a business perspective, what S.T.E.P does. And I'll just touch on, we have one program. We have our main program, which is our emergency financial assistance program. I built that with the social workers. We created this intervention. A family's going to come to us with their burning platform, which is step one of change management. They have a reason to change. Maybe it's the tow truck following them home. It's rarely the first overdue notice they get for something. It's rarely the first, the 3-day pay or quit, the first repossession notice, or the first utility disconnection notice. For whatever it is with them, they get to the point where they know they need to do something and they need to come to us. They can come to our office, they can apply online, they can call us, however they need to get to us, they get to us. And they say these words, I would like your help. I'm tired of it being this way. I wish it could change. We had a Marine that came in our office and he said, it's Friday at 4:30 in the afternoon. And he said he didn't have food to feed his kids that night. We know that Friday morning, all the food didn't like mysteriously disappear out of the cupboard. We knew this had been coming on a long time, right? So these are all long-term problems that finally come to a climax that push somebody to the point where they say, I need help with this. I want help with this. And this Marine came in our office and said that. And if he would have told me or anybody else, we would have grabbed our keys and our wallet, took him to the store and got him the Cocoa Puffs and the mac and cheese and whatever his kids wanted for dinner that night. But he told the social worker that works in my office, and she smiled at him and she said, let's go talk about it. And they got in their little room back there, and she knew her job was to grab that tiny thread, because what she heard was, I want to change. I want your help and I want to do this now. She said, all right, let's see. And she goes back there and starts pulling that thread. She needs to get him from this whisper to on top of his change mountain, right? Where he's communicating this change. Today's my change moment, and I'm fully committed to doing this. To get him there, he needs to think it's possible. He knows he needs a budget, right? He knows he needs to spend less than he makes. He gets all of that. He just thinks that has passed him by and that will never happen for him again. He's lost all hope that he can return to that situation. She has to empower him with that understanding. So she's going to start the conversation by saying something crazy like, why do you want to feed your kids? Why is it that important to you that you drove all the way over here and came up these stairs into our office and told a bunch of strangers that you needed help feeding your kids? Why is it important to you? And they start these conversations about how the dad he wants to be, or the dad he envisioned himself to be, or the dad he didn't envision himself to be, or all these other questions. And she needs to get his why big enough to get over the other why of why he can't control his finances. And she's going to have these discussions with him, and she's going to empower him, and she's going to ensure him that it can be better. And when he gets to that top change moment, because he's going to go through this change, and it's, your burning platform, and you're going to create this guiding coalition, and you're going to create a vision and mission, and then you communicate this change, and you're going to do your action plan, your small wins, big wins, institutionalize. She's going to get him up to this change moment. He's going to communicate this change. He's going to be fully committed with his family. And then they start their action plan. He writes his own budget. We don't write his budget. We never tell him what to do. We're not allowed to do that. The social workers can figure it out really quickly, but they need him to say the words. They lay out the breadcrumbs. They ask the questions that just keep pulling all that stuff that he's been burying in the back of his head up to the front of his head. He creates a cash flow positive budget. He'll do it. He'll create financial goals. But the first thing he'll say is, I don't have financial goals. That's for rich people. She goes, oh, but I heard she wanted to move back to Ohio in 3 years and buy a house. I heard you say you wish you had $1,000 in your savings account, so this would never happen again. I heard you say you wish you could save for retirement. I heard you say you wish you could do this. These are your financial goals. Now you put this long-term vision on their daily finances for something that they want to do that's important to them, and tie that together. They come up with their debt reduction plan. They figure out their payment schedules for both. We write a check. We get them food. We help them with anything else holistically. Also, your car's not registered. Also, you had to drop your car insurance. Also this. Great. Let's handle all of this. Let's figure out what that answer is, and let's get you out back in the world. And then we launch them out, and then we follow them for the year after. And that's really what the program's about. We talked about the community piece. You see some flyers on your tables about a backpack drive. So our back to school program's coming up. I never wanted to have a back to school program. Everybody wanted to give me backpacks. I'm like, no, I just want to focus on doing this emergency financial assistance program. Problem is, if I just do that, nobody knows about it. It's hard for me to go to military bases and just talk about military families in financial crisis. It's hard for me to go to groups like you and say, I just need your money, and that's all I need. That doesn't work. What we have to do is build community. So what we need is volunteers. What we need is community support. What we need is ways to touch more military families. And what we found is by having a back to school program, by having a Thanksgiving program, a Christmas program, an Easter program, a warehouse full of donated goods program, we have a lot more ways that we can connect with the community members like you to help share our message, help get you all involved, help get the hours, the volunteer hours needed to execute all these other programs. And then we take all that stuff, all that love and all that passion, and we take it to the military families. And up here in Washington, we have Linda, who works on that side we really talked about. And then we have another woman, Kia, who's an Army veteran. She's an Army spouse. She's out of JBLM here. And she takes all that stuff and she does the exact opposite at JBLM, at all the other Navy bases, at the Coast Guard base. She'll go set up a table and talk about what we can do for the military families. She'll take those backpacks and get them in the hands of people. She'll figure out how to get all these other donated goods, including cars. We gave out 5 cars last year. I think we're going to give out 2 more that we had donated to us this Veterans Day week. And she will connect all that to those military families, and they'll be able to start talking about S.T.E.P. And S.T.E.P's that place we go when we're really fighting trouble. And we can also have a backpack drive. Interesting with the backpack drive, since I didn't want these secondary programs, these supplemental programs, I didn't want to hand out food. I see that people want it. So how do I do it in a way that maximizes the impact? How do I do something more than just handing out backpacks? And that really came this Camis to College idea. And it's the same theory. How do I have a positive brand impression with these families and then also maximize this economic input that I have that go with that program? When I got out of the military, I had 0 college education. And I got an hourly job working 5:48 at night to 5:48 in the morning, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and every other Sunday night. And after 2 years, I said, this is hard. I need to not be on shift work. I was at Sony Electronics. There's no way I could get a job at any supervisory level or above without a college degree. So I came to the conclusion that I didn't even know where the colleges were around me. I didn't know what colleges were around me. I didn't know how to get there. I didn't know how to park. I didn't know how to get a permit to park. I didn't know what building to look for. I didn't know who inside that building to look for. And if I found that person, what was I going to say? I need a degree. That's all I could come up with. So I did it. And there was one school that finally helped me do it. And from there, I started to learn more about the schools. From there, I was able to, it took me 3 years to get that first degree finished. 2 months later, I had a manager job. My boss was waiting for that. He's waiting for the moment he could just promote me right up. And that was the greatest mover in my life. So how do I help people that I know are in the same situation as me in my backpack program go through that? And that becomes this Camis to College education fair. I bring 25 colleges and universities and I have them set their booths up in a line. The person behind the booth is the person that works with the military. And I said, your job is to answer the questions, because the people are going to come up to you and say, this looks cool. Wish I could do this. I always wanted to be a nurse. You know that you don't have a nursing program, that you know John and Sally, 4 tables down do, right? They don't know how they're going to pay for it, but you know how their benefits work. All these intricacies of how these programs work, it's your job to share it with them. So we bring this educations, colleges, universities, trade schools together. And we say, you are not the customer and you are not the client. The people on the other side of the table, the woman pushing the stroller with the 2 kids that wants to become a nurse, or how to get their 18-year-old into school, or how to use their GI Bill when they get out of the military. And then we actually expanded it too for some K through 12 options, because I grew up in a military family. That means I went to 6 different schools as a kid, and I learned pretty quick. If I kept my mouth shut, sat in the back, it wouldn't get too bad because pretty soon I'd be at a new school and they wouldn't know how bad I was. And that was my strategy. Found out when I was 30 that I had astigmatism, which is why I could never read. It didn't seem like any of my teachers picked up on that either. So we also bring together 20, 30 resources that military spouses have, that military parents have for their kids, that can help their kids get a better education that they have no idea are out there. So an education fair, let's also give them the backpacks that the community wants to make sure gets in their hands. And let's let them know that somebody loves them, somebody cares about them. And oh, by the way, when you really get in financial trouble, S.T.E.P's here for you. So that's why I'm engaged. That's how I got engaged. That's why I do it. This is really what we do. And this is why we're here in Washington. Why I'm here with you today is really just to spread the word, right? We need community support of all kinds. But the most important community support we need is people to know about us and be able to help advocate for us and continue to share and grow the name, the brand, so we can help together grow that mission. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony. Very, very interesting. Oh, okay. All right. Seem to be having a sad night day here today. So, okay, well, thank you again very much, and very interesting program. As a veteran, I can certainly relate to some of those situations. So, questions? Okay, Mike.
Where do you think the failing begins in the financial crisis? Is it at the family? Is it at the school? Is it at the military who do not teach these youngsters, if you will, I would assume mainly younger families, that way to budget or way to deal with finances? Where does it begin? We need more education in the schooling on how to deal with finances at the military. Where? What do you think?
Tony, could you repeat the question? We have people online who probably could.
Okay.
Question.
No, that's a fantastic question, and it's a great starting point for understanding the problem. I experienced this problem myself. Oh, sorry. Where does the problem begin? You just told me to do this. Can't follow directions, see? Where does the problem begin? Is it need more financial training and schooling? Do we need more financial training in the military? And I think the answer to all the options that you listed, which was about 5, is yes. Yes. Our military families are Americans first, right? Before they ever join the military, their financial habits develop between 9 and 11 years old. That's where kids pick up the bulk of their financial habits. 3 out of 5 Americans spend their entire paycheck or more each month. Half of all Americans have less than $400 for an unplanned emergency, and 70% of all Americans have less than $1,000 total net assets. That's America in general. And then every year, 150, 200,000 of those people, 18 to 24-year-olds, join our military. And then what do we do to them? We rip them out of their home environment, the whole entire support structure they've ever known. We're going to move them across the country every 2 to 3 years with unreimbursable expenses. And that puts the spouses in a 50% unemployment, underemployment rate. That locks them into the low income wage by HUD standards that 70% of our service members earn. We're going to deploy that service member between 1/2 and 1/3 of the time. So if you started with 2 parents, you get to go back between 1 and 2. If you only have 1 parent, then you have to go live with your aunt and uncle and have that family dynamic. And at the same time, we're putting that service member in America's 3rd most deadly occupation, where more service members have died over the last 40 years from work-related accidents than any other cause. So you're going to take somebody with poor financial habits at best, excuse me, and then put them in a situation with increased financial stress, increased family stress, and increased work stress. That's really where you see. And they're going to lose their security clearance or not be able to re-enlist if they have financial problems. If they have significant credit issues, they're going to lose their security clearance because they're a risk. And financial stress will distract you from your job performance. And you're not going to get the evaluation marks. You're not going to get promoted. and then you won't be allowed to re-enlist. So you also make it a giant consequence on their part. I think that's the quick answer.
Yeah, I'm gonna follow up on that. First of all, great work you guys are doing. The financial literacy question I know is important to a lot of big business. I don't know if you're involved with Orange County Business Council. I'm a former Orange County guy. I would encourage you to look into them. I see your partner with experience. Yeah. I also know I was involved with the Business Council for 5 years, and it's a countywide consolidated leadership. All of the big businesses there are the Business Council. Bank of America has a keen focus on financial literacy, not just for the military, but
Right.
for young people in general. And your 9 to 11, I think, is a very good point, and I agree with that as a starting point. Our failing our kids on financial literacy. So I'd be happy to introduce you to senior leadership at Bank of America to help with this financial literacy problem. And then a former Experian person, it sounds like you're already connected with Experian. I'm also very good senior leadership experience. I'm also very good connected there. So I'm Larry Rose on your roster there.
Yeah, we appreciate that. We're tied in with Experian in 2 ways. Yeah, but any more, that stuff helps. Right.
Community, if you're not, it's a business community who I know, particularly these 2 companies that I'm very familiar with, want to support that piece of life, that sliver of life.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so the question / statement was interfacing with larger business communities and banks and other agencies, larger agencies that want to support financial literacy. So the offer to make the introductions was there. And offers like that and resources like that are instrumental. So thank you very much. This is what we're looking for. Yeah. How do we do it together?
Your expertise has been above ground because such rate every time you touch the. You obviously have a methodology that you're something very successful. As I listen to you, I'm thinking of social workers working with homeless on the street. Have you guys got some methods? You develop things that want to be used by others?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right. So the question was it appears that we would have a strong program that we use that's highly effective. We consider that our intellectual property. That's like the one thing we have. We created it. It's our program. And the question was, is it leverageable across other demographic groups? And the answer is yes, it definitely is. This is one of the questions I had to answer as the leader. Do I scale or do I go scope? And ultimately, it would have been very easy for me to partner with a lot of my friends in other areas. There's a aging out foster group that I wanted to work with. And there are a lot of homelessness groups that we still want to work with. There's a lot of immigration groups, reentry incarceration, right? All these people would benefit from strong financial behaviors. And the program could easily be adapted. What we opted for several years ago was let's get this in front of more people. Let's get some stronger metrics. Let's get practice in the environment we know and understand. Let's get practice scaling it before we go out in the scope area. I got some very sage advice from actually a politician, which was interesting. I never expected like truly sage advice from a politician. And it was a Friday afternoon. I was in his office. He's a county supervisor. And he said, close that door. I was like, whoa. And he said, Tony, you've been really successful in your little military niche. When you start getting outside of your rice bowl, people aren't going to be as friendly when you start cutting into their funding. And really, that I'll partner with anybody. I'll pay money to partner with, I'll take the burden of it. I'll do all that. And he's like, it's all fun and games until you until you start cutting into other people's funding. And since we don't operate that way by design, it really doesn't come to mind that way. So you one of the areas you mentioned was homelessness. The woman that created S.T.E.P's program, Kathy, she was 12 years at one of our largest homeless shelters, and she was the director of outcomes, and she was banging her head against a wall because it's just essentially a revolving door. And each time, and she had tested out a lot of the tactics of our program in that environment. And as she would make positive change, people would stay less. Instead of 6 months, they're saying 60 days in the shelter, and then they have a less rate of return. But they would also complain that woman's she's really mean, and she's holding my check back from me. And so it was a different dynamic with the leadership there, where she was told to be nicer and don't hold people's checks back from them. So everybody has different motivators, but it is definitely on my dream list to be able to continue to expand this across different scopes. How to do that, it's not going to be a STEP office for every demographic and every, city in the country. There's different ways through partnership or white labeling, or train the trainer type programs or something like that. But yeah, it's great. That's a great question. The question was, do we deal with single service members or families? And if we deal with the single service members, what success rate do we have? So I will say in general, it's usually families. So we serve, E6, E1 through E6, active duty, and in their first 18-month post-discharge. In general, I call them young military families. If there's a single service member, we're willing to help them. However, most of the single service members live in the barracks or on a ship or somewhere where they have something to live in. And usually their issue is their car is going to get repossessed. Well, if you sleep at work, right, and you eat at work and you work at work, losing your car is not a crisis. It's going to suck for your credit score, right? If I can find a way to make that a good lesson, but that's not ultimately a crisis. It's not like they're losing a basic necessity. What they're losing is a luxury that is a bad decision to buy that in the first place. Now, sometimes there's extenuating circumstances, which comes back to doing the right thing. Like maybe they do have a child that they're trying to see, every other weekend and a week in the summer or something like that. And then the car becomes more of a tool, or they have some other obligations in the community. We have just a high success rate with the single service members as we do the families. And it's for the same reasons. They're at a point where it's very meaningful for them to not lose this next thing they're going to lose or restore just what they lost. And we can capitalize on that moment in, psychologically in their head. And, why do you need to keep your car? Sometimes it's other family things we need to think about. We have a lot of family members that feel obligated to send money home still, whether it's, in Kaunas or internationally, right? There's a lot of foreign service members. A lot of them will cell phones. We had one guy that was agreed to pay didn't want his parents going without heat, so he paid their heating oil bill in Chicago, putting their younger siblings through college, right? They'll take on these financial debts for whatever reason, psychologically in the structure of that household as the oldest son or daughter, they felt obligated to try to do something else. And again, the best place for a social worker to interface and start understanding why they want to do that, not just me. I'm like, oh, that's stupid. You can't just send all your money away. It's like, you have to connect on those things. So there's always extenuating circumstances with every one of them, and they all need to be addressed. But them coming in with this desire for it to be different is really what we capitalize on, and the success rate is the same. How about the what? Divorced couples, life is full of challenges. We will work with divorced couples. We ask to see the full documentation. If you're coming to us with a rent issue, let me see the eviction order. Let me see the 3-day pay or quit. Let me see the lease. Let me see the people on there. Let me see your DEAR statement, which is, who's the military service member and who the dependents are. Let's get all this information together. And we get all that information. One thing we're not going to do is break up a family or get in the middle of something like that. So we will always work with the spouse. If there's some other indication or words that came to us about, separation or divorce, then that area is going to need more exploration. If a mom came to us and said, I want a, plane ticket to move me and the kids out of this abusive situation. Like, all right, let's talk through this a little bit more. Our obligation is to that service member. That's kind of what we do. And if the family's intact, then by extension, we will also take care of the family. In divorce situations, it's all case by case, but we don't want to get in the middle of breaking up families. We want to make sure that everybody's kind of whole in there and we do it in a fair way where we don't get ourselves in the middle of a legal issue.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Tony. We've run out of time for questions.
You got one more in the back, real quick.
Can you make it really fast?
Make it really quick. Seems to me you're in the end game business. How can the people in this room help you achieve your end game specifically?
Okay, the question was, it seems that I'm in the end game business. And how do the people in this room and online help us with that end game? So you're our community, and you're the community that is helping us support, these military families achieve these outcomes. So what we need is the resources to do that. So whether that's networks, advocacy, financial resources, time, access, backpacks, everything it takes for us to continue to grow is what we're looking for. So it's all those resources that this Washington team is pulling together to be able to meet these demands and meet these needs. Exposure is fantastic. And that's always been, I'm not going to try to squeeze money out of somebody that they're not ready for. We found that S.T.E.P usually sells itself. Financially, people just make that decision easy. It's like, how do we get this in front of more people to let people decide whether they want to do the volunteer hours, whether they want to host a fundraiser, whether they want to do a backpack collection at their work, or speaking opportunities, or, I know this guy that's looking for somebody like you. Let me connect you. Those types of things.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if there are any additional questions, you can talk to Tony afterwards. I'm sure he'd be willing to stick around for a few minutes. Now it's time to find out what's going on in the community. And we've got Brittany Wickens from Penn Light, our sponsor, who's online. Brittany, would you like to give us an update?
Hi, thank you so much. No real update. Just wanted to thank the Chamber so much for such a wonderful maritime gig parade and weekend. I think Penn Light had a record turnout from our employees to march and hand out candy and beads. So we just really enjoyed our time, and thank you so much for putting that on, and great job by the Chamber team.
Okay, thank you, Brittany. Okay, Miriam.
So thank you, everybody, for turning out to a fantastic Maritime Gig Festival. We had a number of volunteers in the room. Thank you again for volunteering at that event. Couldn't have done it without you. When we have four and a half staff members to put on a 5K, a parade, music in the park, fun run, all of this stuff. We need volunteers, and we couldn't have done it without you all. So thank you so much. It was a great time. Tony, I want to thank you and the team for being here. Linda, thank you for bringing this. I remember when we first had the conversations about this program, thought it was really an important program for our community to learn about. So thank you for coming and sharing this with us, because I would imagine there's a number of us that it touches our hearts for, wanting to get involved in some manner. So thank you for that. We are looking at one of the suggestions from some of the younger families is starting the public affairs forum at 8 o'clock and going from 8 to 9 so that they can actually attend. And so we're looking at that. And we also had Gig Harbor Court, which is located behind the 4700 building. S.T.E.P and say, hey, we would love to host you, and we will provide coffee and maybe a light snack. So no charge to the chamber or to people attending, which is what we would love to have. And they've got a really nice space in their building. So we're going to look at transitioning in July to both an 8 o'clock hour as well as the new location. It'll be about twice as big as the space. So I'm excited about that. And that'll be July 13th that we'll be doing that. So you'll see information coming out about that transition. So I wanted to give you a heads up on that. We're also looking at chamber travel as something that we're going to do in 2024. We've been looking at two different experiences. One, a trip to Croatia, or another one being a cruise. By a show of hands, how many people like to cruise? Okay. And how many people would attend if we did a Croatia travel? Okay. All right. That's very helpful feedback for us. So thank you for that. And Kurt, what's coming up?
By the way, I don't know if any of you know this, but my dog his name is Likovic because he's half Croatian. Anyway, so hey, congratulations to the chamber for putting on such a terrific event this past weekend, the Maritime Gig Festival. It was just outstanding, Miriam. Thank you to your team there and you and everything. It was just super fun. So, hey, mark your calendars 2 weeks from Saturday, concert on the big screen at Zema Homestead Park and the outdoor amphitheater. It is the Fleetwood Mac live concert when they first released the Rumors album that was televised on MTV. This could be broadcast on the big screen at Zema Homestead Park. Free event, food trucks, games for the kids. So join us. Also, what's happening next week? Oh man, it's gonna be fun next week. You got to come. Ed Troyer is going to be here, the Pierce County Sheriff, to give us an update about crime in the county. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. And thank you all for being here. And Tony, thank you very much. You know, as a veteran, my very first military paycheck was $94. So I can certainly sympathize with some of the issues that you were talking about. So we'll see you all next week.